Thank you very much, Adrian, and thank you very much for the invitation here today to speak as well. Huge thanks to all our sponsors, and exciting for me, this is the first study day I've been to in my new capacity as CEO at Cardiomyopathy UK. I've been in my role now for about 4 or 5 months, and we've got lots going on, so I'm going to slightly sidetrack things here and just give you a sort of 2 or 3 minute update on what we're doing at Cardiomyopathy UK and why this particular forum is so important to us. I'm then going to hand over to Katharine, who's going to tell you more about the research we're doing and the research grants in the ICC space as well. So I won't have lots of slides, just the one, and I'm going to jump very quickly through these. But I just really wanted to give you our thoughts on the sector we're working in. My background is very commercial. This is my first foray into the world of charity, but I have come from a healthcare and life sciences background. I was on the executive boards of Genomics England and also at LifeArc, some of you may know, medical research charity before here. So I come with that knowledge. I'm not a scientist by background. I'm not a doctor. So I'm always the one in the room who looks slightly clueless whenever all the clever people are talking about things I don't understand. But what I have done is I've had a lot of experience of a lot of sectors. I can see where the problems are, I can see where the gaps are, and hopefully I can see how we can solve some things going forwards. And I think what I found here more than anything else is the collaborative nature of the world that we're working in is absolutely enormous. There are so many things that we can do. People are so willing to help. Everybody's really driven in the same direction. And it's a really exciting time to be here. There are some amazing discoveries, amazing innovations, and I'm really, really excited to be here at Cardiomyopathy UK at this point in its history. So very quickly going to run through where I see, or what I see our role to be, and where we sit in the ecosystem, and how we can hopefully bring other people together to make a difference. I think one of the things that I've learnt in my 30-odd years in industry, and I do admit I started in banking on the dark side, having come over to the lighter side, one of the things that I've learnt is that nobody can do anything alone, and that particularly in healthcare life sciences, there are so many enormous areas to crack, and that collaboration is absolutely key. And it's the people who are in this room today, our sponsors, our patient communities, policymakers, and pharma industry and other areas of industry as well, all working together, we can make a difference, but individually we can't, which is why it's so critical that you're all here today. So very quickly going to run through the things that matter to us and why I think we can make a difference at CMUK. First of all, knowing the signs, education, absolutely critical first step for us. Getting earlier diagnosis, getting people to understand their symptoms, getting into primary care earlier, but also making sure that primary care physicians know those symptoms as well and can get diagnosis correct and quickly. So comprehensive care packages. We're constantly told by our patient communities that they feel absolutely lost when they get the diagnosis. For a lot of people, there isn't a cure. It's something that they have to learn to live with. And that might be through benefits, it might be through whether they can exercise, it might be through mental health support for their families. That for us is really, really important and a key part of what we do in the charity. I'll come back to number 3 because that's critical to today. Equitable access to care and fast access to care, that's the fourth on this, but the third point to make today. I've been genuinely shocked at how long people are waiting for things like an echo, the length of the waiting list to see a consultant in any part of the country. And then I was talking to Jerry Carr-White, who I'm sure many of you will know, a few weeks ago, and he was saying that he's got enormous waiting lists of whom half probably don't even need to see him because their first diagnosis was wrong. So how do we make that more efficient and make sure that people are getting to see the right doctor fast enough and getting the right treatment for them? And equally across the country, it doesn't matter where you live, that should be a right for everybody. Next point, and again, Katharine will be talking to this in a moment, is research and innovation. For us, really, really important, very exciting, and Katharine will talk to this in a minute, that we're starting to make some research grants now. And hopefully we're looking to some fairly significant growth within the charity next year, when we'll certainly be investing more of our income into research grants going forwards to accelerate the pace of new findings and innovation. And the last piece, which is particularly close to my heart, having spent, and just chatting to Patrick here, a chunk of my career at Genomics England, that was just when they'd finished the 100,000 genome screening project, and we were just rolling it out into the NHS, into mainstream care. For me, that's so critical that we find those all of the people in the community who may have a risk of an inherited condition. If we can find people, we can prevent the disease, we can personalise the treatment, it would absolutely revolutionise the delivery of care. And I firmly, firmly believe in that. They were doing some great work at Genomics England, and I know see many other organisations, both private and public sector, around the country and around the world are doing that now as well. So that's why this is so important. Inherited conditions, I think, is where we can really, really turn the dial. We can make a difference. And it's by having you in the room today, it's by having you on board with us, working with industry, working with government, working with politicians to shift policy, to make a difference in healthcare. Let's get people diagnosed early, let's prevent these things happening, and let's personalise healthcare as best we can. But we can't do that if we're not getting people tested in the first place. So genomic testing for me is a real personal passion that I will certainly be pushing through in my role here. So as I say, slightly derailed from the, so apologies for slightly derailing from the agenda today, but I just wanted to give those sort of 5 pillars that we're working on at Cardiomyopathy UK to tell you how excited I am about being here, about my role, and about the changes that I'm seeing and the amazing people that I work with every day, both in our organisation, in our community, the patients, the physicians, and in industry and government. There are just so many great brains and collaborative people out there, and we are going to make a difference. So on that note, thank you to all of you, to our sponsors, and obviously to Adrian for the most amazing organisation of today. And now I'll hand over to Katharine, who's our Head of Policy and Research, who will tell you all the clever bits that I've missed out. Thanks, Katharine.
Hello. So yes, I'm Katharine. I'm Head of Research and Policy here at Cardiomyopathy UK. I've been here for 2.5 years now, but have a long history of working with patient organisations. So previously having worked in mental health and neurology predominantly. So cardio has been new to me. It's been lots to learn, really interesting stuff. Here we go. So I want to start today by talking to you about our future research priorities piece of work that we did a year or 2 back now. So we did this partnership with the James Lind Alliance, who, for any of you who don't know them, they're an independent organisation who have a really credible methodology for how you should work out what the future research priorities should be in any given disease area. And the reason for doing that is to bring in the voices of healthcare professionals and patients equally, because researchers, whilst they're getting much better at talking to all of us, haven't traditionally always been very good at that and pursue research interests based on all sorts of things. So it's about bringing the patient voice and healthcare professional voice back into what the top topics that are being focused on should be. So it was a really involved process. It took us a year, and we ended up with these top 10 research questions. And I have highlighted there the 3 that I think are most relevant to today, and that there were 3 within the top 10 that are relevant today goes to show how important this topic is to the community. So that includes how often should family members at risk of developing cardiomyopathy be being screened, in at number 2 on our list, and which are the best tests to use, when's it safe to stop, and then should treatment for cardiomyopathy be tailored to the individual, e.g. based on their specific gene variant? So, and then about why people with the same genetic variant are being affected differently. So there's some lots of work to be done in terms of future research, I think, in this area. Trouble with there we go, that's better. So in response to the James Lind top 10, our focus in the first instance has been getting some catalyst grants off the ground to make sure that there is research that is going on that answers these questions. So we have been very excited to run our first ever research grants round, and we have just closed to applications. We've just had some applications in, which is very exciting. And we are hoping to fund 2 projects of up to £25,000 for 24 months duration. And I'm hoping that next year we'll be able to make an announcement regarding the next round. What I haven't put on here is that we do a newsletter for researchers every now and again, and that if you are interested in getting signed up to that, there is information over on the stall. So if this is the sort of thing that you might like to hear about in future, please do go and get signed up. In relation to our Catalyst research grants, we recently ran Catalyst Connections. So for those of you in the room that are researchers or who know of researchers, please do tell them about this. So if you ever want to chat to patients about a research idea that you have that you want to get funded and you need, some insights to help you get it off the ground, this is a sort of thing that could be for you. So we held these informal conversations between researchers and research volunteers, and we had incredibly positive feedback from those that were involved. They felt that it really helped move their ideas forward. And we are going to monitor whether or not it helps the researchers who are involved be successful either in our grants or other future grants as well. So that's one of the ways that we might help you as researchers, for those of you who are researchers or your colleagues. Another way is in relation to our sort of formal partnerships and insight work. So on the left there, I've listed some of the projects that we are involved with or have been involved with to date, providing patient insight in either developing research proposals and or providing ongoing advice for the duration of the projects. We have now got a really active list of research volunteers on a mailing list that we regularly share opportunities with. So if ever you're doing something that you want shared with cardiomyopathy community, then please do get in touch with us, because we should be able to help with that. Or indeed, you need to hold a focus group or whatever else it might be. We can work with you on those sorts of things. And I just wanted to end by talking to you a little bit about our My Insight survey, just because I realise I am pretty much at time. This was a big survey that we did last year of our community to find out people's experiences of treatment and care and all sorts of other things. It was a 44-item questionnaire. And we've been looking at the data and are going to be publishing the technical report and the policy report this autumn. But I thought I would just pull out a couple of things that might be interesting to everyone here in relation to today's topic. In relation to genetic testing, we asked about people being offered genetic testing and family members being offered genetic testing, and whether the people were given a letter to help with that in conversation, and whether family members were offered genetic testing, who were offered genetic testing, and whether they took it up. These are the results. So we found that 59% said yes, and they were taking up the offer. No, but I would like this was 19%, which we thought was quite high, especially if you look at the not applicables. That includes people who said that their cardiomyopathy is unlikely to be genetic. So it might be that there were more people who had a cardiomyopathy that's unlikely to be genetic than had understood that was the case. But at face value, at least, it looks like there's quite a lot of people out there who are still not getting the access to genetic testing that they want, which is concerning to us. And then on the have your family members been offered genetic testing, 55% at yes, 38% at no. So again, numbers looking really quite high. And 70% of those who had been offered the genetic testing for their family had been given a letter to help with that. But then over a fifth said that they hadn't received such a letter, 21%. And then we had 84% saying that all of or some of their family members had taken up the genetic testing. So pretty high for those who were offered it, said that they were doing that, which just goes to show the level of interest. So just to say that this data that we did as part of the My Insight survey, we are making it available to UK-based researchers, and we can do things with that data, such as look at it, cut it by different types of cardiomyopathy or different demographics. So if that is of interest, I don't know if that QR code is going to be big enough, but we do also have a really nice big poster, a big academic poster out there in the breakout area. About the survey and all sorts of other questions that I haven't highlighted today. So please do go and take a look and scan that and get in touch if this might be of interest to you. So that's all I had to say for today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katharine. I'd like to introduce Allyson Arnold, who's the Chief Operating Officer at British Heart Foundation Clinical Research Collaborative. Alyson's going to talk to us about the work that the BHF are doing in the research space. Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you very much. And yes, thank you for inviting me. And I think I've got the penultimate graveyard shift of Friday afternoon. So well done to the hardcore for staying put now. But I'm Allyson, Arnold, the Chief Operating Officer for the British Heart Foundation Clinical Research Collaborative. And I just wanted to briefly speak the next 10 minutes or so about how we're developing cardiovascular research in the UK. It's not specifically directed to ICC, but you'll be able to sort of take work that you might be doing and translate it into some of the services that we are offering as well. So there we go. So just to introduce our small but perfectly formed team. There's a group of 4 of us. You might have met Mariana and Vasilena out of our stand today. We work with, although we're fully funded by the British Heart Foundation, we're actually hosted by the British Cardiovascular Society. And the reason behind that, we sit with the BCS because we work and operate through all of the affiliated societies and the professional societies and help within their research groups and support them that way. We have a clinical lead, Professor Rod Stables, who's an interventional cardiologist based up in Liverpool. And again, although we're quite a small team, we're quite agile, and we're able to support and facilitate with the administration of research efforts through our societies. So what are we here to do? We're really essentially have been set up to really support high quality cardiovascular clinical research in the UK and make sure that it's of the highest sort of impact with possibly sort of international impact as well. And we just want to make sure that it's coordinated in such a way so there's no duplication of effort and that we're going to see really, really good quality cardiovascular research. And we've got 3 areas that we work towards. Some of our activities are underpinned by 3 of our goals. One, again, is around promoting the coordination and effective planning and delivery of clinical research. Secondly, we really want to add value to some of the problems that our stakeholders are facing, and we want to sort of provide some tangible solutions to those. And finally, possibly the most important one is around engaging the wider research community. We want to reach out and really diversify research and possibly, encourage those who might not necessarily be involved in research or don't know how to get involved and work across the board. So this is including working with trainees, working with allied health professionals, and most importantly as well, patients and the public, and really bringing them together. So our network, rather than sort of putting a list of all the names of our people in our network, I thought sort of visually we'd sort of, discuss what it means to us, what a network is to us and what collaboration is. And really, again, I'm talking about a sense of community, coming together to really support research and make it much bigger and better with a diverse range of people, And that's actually some of the practical elements we do is we literally sort of set up meetings, either sort of face-to-face or increasingly online now, but actually sort of keep that momentum going and make sure that that service is in place for you all. And I think, the sort of little word cloud at the bottom screen, what is collaboration? There's lots of words people say, we're sharing ideas, we're exchanging knowledge, we're kind of, sort of looking at supporting and assisting. And I think one word that really always strikes me, it kind of comes out as this idea of trust. And I think that's really building that trusted network and that environment to make sure that so not only the funders have trust that this is the research that they're funding is important, they're asking the right questions, that the wider diverse community is on board with this question, they're happy to fund it, that clinicians and all the professionals involved have trust within each other, and ultimately as well patients, they have trust that this is the research that's really important to them, so it'll mean that they'll want to take part in it. So talking about sort of why networks matter, like why did the BHF want to sort of invest in this area? And it's interesting. So we've been set up for about 6 years now. And I think we always had a hard time explaining what the CRC was and what we did. And I sort of only dawned on me, my 11-year-old daughter says, Mummy, what do you do all day? And I thought, I used to say, I bring people together and coordinate research and collaborate and make big, impactful research. And I thought, that's just not cutting it, because she was like, and most people are. And so I said, you know what, we're a dating site. We operate as a dating and a matchmaker and a networker, and that's effectively actually we use that analogy now, and it kind of works because, just like in sort of relationships, research doesn't happen in isolation. You need to have connections. You need to help sort of come together and find that match. And that's what we're doing, through the CRC. And we're sort of having those sort of meaningful conversations, bringing people together to have that. And also, strong relationships are going to be building, better studies. They're building sort of better funding opportunities, and ultimately, better patient outcomes. And again, I think this is a key reason why the BHF is so invested in this infrastructure. We were set up with initial 3-year funding, and then they sort of gave us another 5 years funding, which we're grateful for. And they're really invested in this setting up because they know that when patients are involved at the very start of the research pipeline, that research is going to go on and actually be delivered, because it's going to be asking the right question. It's going to be much more successful as well. And I just highlight this, this was the Health Research Authority had commissioned a study a couple of years ago and, said, what does it matter, when you take part in research, what is the biggest issue? And the number one issue is that it's important to the person, it's important to the people taking part. And, you think it's sort of a no-brainer, but it's really important to involve those. If you don't involve the people who you're actually doing research on and for, then you might be asking the wrong questions. So ultimately, we're an ultimate matchmaker. We've got a lot of tools that sort of help support this collaboration, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides, actually. But, to have this sort of easier communication and facilitate that. And, this isn't sort of speed dating. It's not sort of a one sort of stop shop. It's, it's long-term commitment. We're really in it for the long gain. And sort of, when we bring groups together, we want to see that through, through the whole pipeline in the process. So some of the ways we do this, and I mentioned before, one of our sort of goals is around providing real solutions and tangible sort of support. And we have a series of support services on offer. One, we have developed some education around research. We have a small fund that we offer as well. We have a database, which I will go on to in a bit more detail in the next couple of slides. We engage with the clinical trials units across the UK. And again, this was really important to ensure that the clinical trials units, we know what type of research they're doing so that we know the research that's going to the CTU is the right research for that CTU, because there's some CTUs which might be better, at doing a trial. And it's not just because it's someone's, next door neighbor or they've had links to the CTU all the time. And Connect Cardiology is a program that we've set up with the junior cardiologists, the trainees, to help early career researchers get involved in sort of multi-center studies and audits as well. So just to go into a little bit more detail about a research development fund. So this is a very small seed funding opportunity. And I say small, we only offer sort of up to £10,000. We have around a couple of times a year. And the applications are actually prioritized through our steering group that's actually set up through the leads of each of the research groups from our societies. So in the case of ICC, it would be, they're BICS now, the British Inherited Cardiac Society. So Stephen Page is our research lead for that. And since we've set up, we've supported over 28 projects now and invested just over £225,000. And these are very small funding opportunities for things like pilot projects, systematic reviews. It could be retrospective data analysis, but we're finding it kind of helps get through the sort of bottleneck to develop into further and bigger research projects. And a lot of our funds have actually gone on to get further funding and bigger grants and publications and whatnot. So briefly, education again. We sort of see the gaps in learning, and we want to see where we can offer support. And we've got some fantastic podcasts on our website around, this one is a Fellows Guide to Out-of-Program Research, and another one we've just commissioned a series called Demystifying Research from Cardio Webinar. And again, these are really bite-sized podcasts that you can sort of listen, wherever you are, sort of go onto our website and find out a bit more, which is useful for all sort of professions as well. And finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our database. So this has been set up. We've been working on it for the last couple of years, and you may have seen on the stand. You may have picked up some details from there. But I'd really encourage you, if you're interested in research and want to collaborate a bit more, to just go on. It doesn't take long. It's probably about 5 minutes. Register your details. And with this database, it really is registering your interest in research. So what disease area you're interested, what type of research you might want to do, how you might want to become involved. Do you want to be a lead PI? Do you want to collaborate? Do you have a unit that has support and skills that might be able to support a trial as well? We have a section that we've just developed for patients and public to register as well, and that's really key. We've got a great drive, and thank you, Cardiomyopathy UK, for promoting it through your channels, because we've got a lot of patients now on there because they're able to put their non-clinical skills, and this is hugely important when developing research. It's not just about clinical skills; it's things like marketing or communications or finance or legal. Somebody might have that and be part of a research group, and it's really valuable when going for funding opportunities as well. So just a couple points on the database. It's not public facing, so you wouldn't be able to go on yourself and fund somebody just due to GDPR issues. But requests come through our small core team, and we would then, again, sort of going back to the matchmaking, we'd contact that person and see if they would like to be matched up together. And also, it's not a place to put trials. So you won't sort of go and find a project on there, not yet. We might be sort of developing it further down the line for that. So it's not about taking part in a trial. It's about the very beginning of the research pipeline. So you've got an idea, you want to come together and work on this. And again, it's really making sure we're avoiding that duplication of effort and bringing people out of their silo, sort of traditional working methods. So finally, and I won't read all this, but just don't take my word for it. We went out to our groups and said, what is the CRC to you? What does it mean? How are we helping you? And we work with a variety of groups through the societies. And, I just highlighted some of the words that come out, things like support and enable and empower. And I talk a lot about, and Anna and I were talking earlier about, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a researcher, but I think the passion that is around it in the room, and you guys are so time poor, and I think clinical research is about 1% of your time, but I think if we can do that sort of heavy lifting and just get that going for you, we're really, encouraged by that. So that's kind of what we do, to enable that, that group support. And just a few more, again, the junior cardiologist saying, providing advice, infrastructure and support. And we're really great we want to be the clinical research hub for anybody who wants to know anything about cardiovascular research. Come to our site and we can signpost people, to that and create awareness as well of various research activity around the UK. So thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it. And the details, please go onto our website, phfcrc.org. My sort of email's up there as well, and our inquiries email, because we're quite a small team, we chat all the time, so we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But I think it'll be about connecting that and hopefully sort of set a bit more research groups and support for you. So thank you.
Okay, we're just going to swap around our top table now, and we'll carry over questions until after we've heard from Unboxed, Anumana, and who else is on our program? And Alexion, Sano Genetics.
Good enough. So, you know me, this is my colleague, Liam Hinshelwood, and we're going to be talking today about screening at scale. Liam, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm head of design. Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Hello, is that working? Good. Okay. Hi, my name's Liam Hinshelwood. I'm head of design at an agency called Unboxed. We are a service design and digital product agency. And we really focus on what we like to say, helping big picture thinkers solve knotty problems. And anyone who's met Will realise he's got quite big ambitions, and that screening for cardiac conditions is obviously a very knotty problem, as we've experienced today.
So, recently a colleague of ours got in touch with me to say, I finally took my letter my dad had to the GP, essentially saying that she was a relative of somebody with HCM and the GP needed to refer me. I gave this letter to my GP, who called me confused and asked me to do an ECG and check me over, not what the letter was asking him to do. And that seems to be a common issue in terms of kicking off screening. And as we've spoken about today, central to knowing how to screen the relative is getting the probands, phenotype, genotype, identity, consent, and sharing it with the relative and with the relative's caregiver, healthcare professional. And if we just focus on this issue about gene testing and whether people are being gene tested, I think you've heard from multiple sources today that it's not necessarily happening. This is data from the West Midlands, provided by the Central and South GMSA. And essentially you've got, along the bottom is the genetic amount of genetic testing being done for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy by the regional genetics unit. Then you have the cardiomyopathy unit, and then you have the other 8 hospitals in the region. And what you can see is obviously a dip over COVID during the pandemic when there was a reduction in activity. But what you're starting to see is mainstreaming taking off. So gene testing is happening in other hospitals, but it's localized to maybe 2 or 3, and that means for certain there are people out there with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy who aren't being gene tested. And if we think about the colleague who got in touch with me, and imagine closer to home that this is somebody managed by a colleague of Will and I's who sits outside the cardiomyopathy service but has gone to the trouble of gene testing the patient, the problems don't really stop there. So as the receiving cardiologist, we've got the colleague's referral from primary care, and if the proband is given consent, we can access their Birmingham UHB records, but that requires the genetic test result to find its way into our records, and that doesn't always happen. And nor do we necessarily have the digital pedigree to link up these people. Very often it's a paper pedigree. So this is what it looks like locally, and I think that almost certainly this looks similar to other people's. Everything hinges on the gene testing, but the process by which a relative finds their way into a specialist clinic is drawn out. And to somebody who wants to get assessed and evaluated after being told that the proband has got the condition, it can look a bit like this. You might not get told by your relative that they've got the condition. Even when they've given you the letter and you get to the GP, you might meet a barrier there because the GP doesn't believe in screening. Then you might get referred to the specialist service, but there's a kind of 1-2 punch because the specialist service has to go and seek the information from the proband's clinical team. And then to top it all off, you've got problems with diagnostic delays because of long waiting lists in echo. And added to which, I think as lots of people have alluded to, we're lacking data across the piece. So we're doing all this work, but not quite clear on which families we're having the biggest impact on. And certainly there's no national audit, for example. So
this is a big question. So why did public services fail the public? And we've got a little example here of like one particular reason why that happens. So this is Melvin Conway, and he came up with this particular, well, it's now a law these days, but this is a broad conclusion from an article he wrote in 1967, which states that organisations which design systems, in the broadest sense, are constrained to produce designs which are copies of those communication structures of those organisations. Or reframed slightly, organisations which design services are constrained to produce designs which mirror the structures of those organisations. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this. Actually, before that, the important thing here is that service users don't really care about your organisational structure. They see the world through the lens of their needs specifically, okay? So, a couple of examples of where this works and where it doesn't. Has anyone tried to get rid of a sofa before, had the council try to pick it up, right? You need to go and find the bulk uplift service. That's because there's a bulk uplift service team, but no one knows what that team actually does in reality, right? So if you're trying to find that service, you need to know what that is. It's very, very hard. It's much better these days in many cases, but it's not perfect. But there's a really good example of this working much, much better. So has anyone applied for, or not applied, or applied for a driving license or renewed their driving license recently? Hands up, anyone? Yeah? Okay. Did anyone have to send a photo in or not send a photo? You had to send a photo in. Did anyone not send a photo in? Right. Where did your photo come from? Passport. Yeah? So what's really interesting about that example is you've got the DVLA, which lives in the Department for Transport, contacting the passport office that lives in the Home Office, all run through gov.uk, which lives in the Cabinet Office. So there's multiple organisational barriers that have been overcome to deliver a much, much more effective service. So what's this look like for screening? So we've clearly got some interesting barriers that are experienced along the way. Firstly, you've almost got this regional boundary, which you might experience. If, for example, a proband lives in a different region to a relative, you've got an immediate regional boundary between two different NHS organisations. Moving further down the journey here, you've got organisational boundaries between primary and secondary care. And further on, you've got technology or data boundaries between services as well. But that's not necessarily a problem for an innovation point of view, because innovation happens at these boundaries, as that vehicle, or the DVLA example, proves. Cool.
So with this in mind, last year, with the support of our local hospital charity, we reached out to Unboxed, and we set about a project that involved Cardiomyopathy UK, and to an extent involved the BHF CRC, because they'd given us seed funding to bring together a half dozen centres across the UK to start to look at screening in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in a bit more detail.
So we've been on a bit of a design journey. This is a model from the Design Council developed about 20 years ago, which broadly describes how the design process works. It doesn't really like this in practice, it's much messier. But in broadest terms, we know there's a problem in the first instance. So we go into a project knowing roughly what we need to kind of work on. And then we go through a process of using research to discover more about that problem. And then a process of defining and focusing our efforts on the specific problem we want to solve and how we're going to solve it. From there on in, we develop lots of ideas around how we're going to solve that problem, and then deliver the specific solution to that problem. And we're roughly halfway through the final diamond here. You could kind of summarize these two diamonds into two specific statements. So the first one is all about designing the right thing, and the second is designing it right. So in the first diamond, we spent a lot of time engaging with research, with users, with stakeholders, developing prototypes that help us understand specifically where we want to focus our work. We got to the point of identifying specifically how we want to engage the next phase of design, and develop more prototypes that help us prove and validate our concept. We're now at the point where we want to move into developing a service for users that will be hopefully proof of concept going live with patients relatively soon.
And as part of that work, we overhauled our pathway. So a lot of it, you'll see, looks very similar, as in what happens after the proband has been gene tested, if that identifies a pathogenic mutation. So the genetic screening is largely similar. Very akin to the work Georgiana discussed, we prioritise accessing the probands, gene testing them and consenting them. And our variation on our current model is for that work to be done in the community, and I'm looking at two members of the regional familial hypercholesterolemia team who essentially gave us an illustration of how you can deliver specialist care in the community when thinking about gene testing. And what we're hoping to do is piggyback off their work and use members of their team to deliver this gene testing for probands once they're confirmed to have the condition. Another vital role they play is to collect relevant family history. So we're already primed as to which are the first-degree relatives that need to be screened. And then, as we'll show you, we developed prototypes that allowed us to still maintain the role of the proband in distributing invitations, so we would never break confidentiality, but importantly send out invitations that contained an electronic link back to the proband. So there was no searching for the team receiving that referral and having to work out who the proband was in the first place. And importantly, and very much aligned with what the government's been talking about, we were delivering as much as we could in the community close to the person's home. So when it came to diagnostic testing, the plan is for us to be able to use community diagnostic centres. And a key final arm of it is that data is collected along that journey automatically and reused for different purposes. And the idea long term is that if as a team you want information for this year's appraisal, it would be available automatically. And as we'll show you, if you want others to be able to see the performance of your service, you would be able to show that immediately.
So yeah, a couple of quick examples. So Will already referenced helping probands to make contact with relatives here. Another piece of this too is actually making sure that the proband has lots of really good quality information to help them feel comfortable as much as possible to help integrate that diagnosis as well along the way. If we click the next slide on, just to show you what some of these prototypes look like. So this is an example of a prototype we developed for exploring the journey of the proband being supported to contact their relative effectively. In this instance, they are contacted with a text message. That message provides them with a reference code that they can then send on to their relative. And if they want to, an optional message which is written in really clear, simple language that helps the relative understand the diagnosis, understand the next steps and what their role in booking into screening. That message then sent on to the relative who uses the code to book their screening and hopefully get screened relatively quickly. We also looked at proms as well and how proms could be a really, really important part of this journey. Specifically, we were using the HCM prom, which is developed by and licensed by Myers-Squibb for free. Bristol Myers-Squibb for free. And this would enable self-reporting that would typically, for issues that would specifically be explored in the first appointment post-diagnosis. This information can be reviewed earlier to enable quicker risk stratification and evaluation of patients with their condition. Poorer scores could be flagged earlier and enable the clinical team to follow up, to create follow-up appointments so they can be scheduled when the patient needs them most. And finally, performance. So as Chris pointed out this morning, good quality data is really, really, really important to understand the efficacy of screening. And capturing structured data about patients and relatives can really help us to do this. So we explored how automating and consolidating data about HCM screening from all available sources and structured sources could help enable better access to data and key quality metrics for research and audit. And this is similar to the Birmingham City Council Observatory Cancer Screening Data Platform, which is really a model for where we're going to take this going forward.
So in terms of lessons learned, I think one thing that is illustrated by this chair. So does anybody know, besides having an appealing aesthetic, why there are holes in this chair? So, yep, that's true. So you could cut down on costs, and that's relevant to this as well. There's another reason as well. Say it again. Good answer. I like that. It's not the right one, though. Is there anyone else? Okay, so basically it's lighter to carry. And I think going through this process, what became really clear is that for patients, for relatives, and for the clinical team delivering screening, carrying the load of data is really hard work. And actually, we need very little data to make this work. And we only need it once, but instead, I don't know about you, but our teams have loads of letters and emails and phone calls, and it's just really messy. This design process allows us to unpick all of that and unburden it and make it very streamlined and make the data work for us rather than the other way around. I think the other thing that I learned from Liam and his colleagues is this idea about being frugal. You don't have to have a massively expensive process. There's lots of open source tools that you can plug into, and there's loads of resources that we can use, like the community diagnostic centres that are on people's doorsteps. It's really about the glue that joins all these different things. That's where the value is.
Yeah, and for me, I think one of the things that I was talking to William about earlier this week is that I think service design is like contrast in medical imaging. It really helps you to understand the structure and system of an organisation really effectively and understand where those blockages are and how you can help address those issues.
Perfect. So where are we at the moment? Well, our grant is with a certain funding body. I will not mention who, but you can see here the colleague who came to us with this sort of complaint about the screening process in the first place is very keen and finds our proposal pretty appealing and is hopeful that we get funded. And what's also attractive about this process is this idea, as the title alluded to, that you can grow this across large footprints, and you can modify it depending on local resources and the way in which services are provisioned. So one idea is that this scales for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but obviously would be very interested in doing so across different inherited cardiac conditions.
And that's us. If you want to learn more about this piece of work, scan the code, the case studies on our website. So yeah, jump in. Thank you very much.
So in the interest of time, I think we'll have questions at the end. So I'm going to next invite to the stage Dr. Weehip and Dr. Samir Awasthi, who work for a company called Anumana. And I had a very enjoyable dinner with last night. I won't tell you too much about the red wine we drank. They have made some groundbreaking strides in terms of AI and ECG algorithms, and be interested to hear what they have to tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, so what I want to talk to today is our pipeline of algorithms that take in a 12-lead ECG and provide a prediction for a disease that you wouldn't typically identify via a 12-lead ECG, starting with low ejection fraction, but we have a pipeline of algorithms that goes pretty broad. And I think like in the context of what's been talked about today, what I hope you come away with, or at least start to come away with, is this idea that AI applied to the ECG can add a dimension of knowledge to screening programs that's not currently used today. It's available in the waveform itself, but even with standard of care ECG reading, you're not getting the type of information that you are when you apply AI to the 12-lead ECG. And so you'll see how that impacts risk stratification in some of the prospective studies that have been done with the algorithms to date. So a little bit about Anumana. Anumana is a company that was formed by Mayo Clinic and Inference. Inference is a data science company that has built a platform that essentially makes electronic health record data computable. So this is the full scope of EHR data, structured, unstructured, raw images, raw waveforms. And what we do at Anumana is we use that data to create and study AI algorithms, which we then take to validation. It's a very deep and rich data set, large data set, 11 million plus patients. Mayo was our index partner with that data set, and we've since broadened to a number of other institutions in the United States. Mayo Clinic has a long history in ECG AI. They created some of the first algorithms, so we partnered together to leverage the strengths of both companies and form Anumana to really develop new algorithms rapidly and get them into the clinic. We've been around for about 4.5 years, 2 FDA-cleared products. There's also a CE mark in place for the low ejection fraction algorithm. And probably what's most unique about Anumana is that close to 100 peer-reviewed publications underlie our pipeline of algorithms. We'll talk a bit about workflow integration if anyone's interested, but in the United States, at least the way that we're approaching it is that we want clinicians to be able to leverage AI as they do any other laboratory test. So no deviation from their workflow, from their electronic health record. It's a seamless order result that's available to them. So why the ECG? It's a widely used, standardized test, actually globally. So the platform for deploying this analysis is already there. Even in rural settings, most people have access to a 12-lead ECG if they have access to a physician. There's also an abundance of information in that waveform that we as humans are not using today. Heart failure was the first disease that we targeted. It's a very large global burden, and it's growing linearly. Yet it's also very well studied. And what we know is that if you diagnose a patient with heart failure earlier and you get them onto guideline-directed medical therapy for heart failure, you improve outcomes. So you actually see reduced morbidity, reduced mortality, reduced cost of care because that patient is on GDMT earlier rather than later. So the question is, how do we get those patients onto GDMT? Right now, we know that about 40% of patients are diagnosed with heart failure for the first time in the emergency room. That's essentially stage C heart failure. We want to capture them in stage B. So that's where this AI tool comes in. Why do we think it's even possible? Well, at the basic science level, we know that if you put an electrode into a cardiomyocyte from a failing heart, that the action potential is different. In the acute phases, it's higher in amplitude, shorter in duration. In the chronic phases, it's shorter in amplitude, longer in duration. Now you put several billion of these together and what you have is the 12-lead ECG. So what we have done is we've taken 12-lead ECGs paired to a measurement of ejection fraction coming from an echocardiogram. So over 100,000 data points go into the training of the algorithm. And what you get out of it is a tool that has actually very good discrimination for systolic dysfunction or ejection fraction of less than or equal to 40%. The AUC, which is a measure of how good that discrimination is 0.93. Just for context, if you're flipping a weighted coin, the AUC, you'd expect it to be 0.5. If you have a perfect test, it'd be 1. If you look at other standard of care tests today, like NT-proBNP, put in the same situation, essentially head-to-head with the low EF algorithm, its AUC is 0.7 to 0.8 for identifying a reduced ejection fraction. If you look at a treadmill test for identifying coronary disease, the AUC is 0.85. And then digital mammography for identifying breast cancer, which is done in every woman today, AUC is 0.78 to 0.89. So it is a good test. Now, the evidence underlying it, it's at this point, it's almost as good as a drug that's hitting the market. So the development of the algorithm goes back almost a decade now. As I said, 100,000 or so patients worth of data went into the development of the algorithm. That was published in 2019. Between 2019 and the algorithm's clearance in the US, probably another 50,000 patients worth of studies were done that covered performance of the algorithm in different care settings, as well as different care models. So primary care, emergency care, intensive care, different disease states, inflammatory disease, infectious disease, peripartum cardiomyopathy. And probably most important was that there was a randomized controlled trial that showed what happened when primary care doctors had the AI in hand and compared that to primary care doctors that were just performing care as usual. We'll dive into that in a moment, but the gist of it is that with the AI in hand, the clinicians are better able to diagnose low ejection fraction, so more efficient and more effective diagnosis of low EF. We've also done a multi-center validation study of performance going outside the development data set. So one question with AI is, does it scale? If you develop it in one data set, can you apply it to other, to patients who are in different systems? And in the United States, we did a study at 4 centers outside of the Mayo Clinic, 16,000 patients. We'll talk through those results, but really what we showed was that the performance was very, very similar to what we saw within Mayo Clinic. The algorithm has also been studied internationally by Mayo colleagues. And today now, a number of different groups have published a low EF algorithm all over the globe. So I think we're fairly confident that it's a scalable test. We've also made efforts to making this a sustainable technology, which in the US means that someone's paying for it. So we've established a billing framework in the US for ECG AI, and as of January 1st of this year, the US government is actually paying for the test in clinical care in outpatient settings. So the randomized controlled trial that was conducted out of Mayo was a fairly large one. It was 22,000 patients, 358 clinicians. Clinicians were randomized into an intervention arm and a control arm. Now, in the intervention arm, clinicians essentially, if any of their patients had an ECG done, the AI was automatically run on that ECG. And if that patient tested positive, the result was sent to the clinician, basically telling them that their patient tested positive on the low EF algorithm. The recommendation is to order an echocardiogram to confirm the diagnosis of low EF. And so it was entirely up to the clinician whether or not to follow up on that and order the echo. What we saw was that in the intervention arm, The low ejection fraction was diagnosed 30% more frequently than in the control arm, but the total number of echoes being performed was no different between the two arms. So it's telling us that the diagnostic yield of echocardiography is increasing because the clinicians basically have an additional data point in hand to add what they're doing in standard of care today. What that results in is more efficient use of the echocardiogram. And if you think about heart failure as a progressive disease, that 30% bump in low EF detection, probably, and this is low EF less than 40%, probably is not, actually, sorry, this is less than 50%, so it's including mid-range EF. It's probably not new disease that we're not seeing in clinical care. It's probably disease that's actually being identified earlier. And so that's the point at which we want to capture the patients, particularly when they're in that mid-range EF phase. You can treat them, potentially reverse the disease course, prolong quality of life. So the retrospective clinical validation study, I have the results here. Basically, the point to get across is that when taking this algorithm outside the Mayo Clinic, sensitivity, specificity were within 1% of what we saw within Mayo Clinic. AUC was quite strong, 0.93, as it was at Mayo. So now this is fairly specific to what's been cleared and is on the market in the United States, but in cardiovascular AI today, there have been about 115 solutions cleared that predict disease states. However, their clinical validation is it's variable. So only half of those devices actually have something as simple as the size of their clinical validation study reported. And when you actually look at the sizes of the clinical validation study, again, the size attenuates quite rapidly. And that's important because when you think about a tool that can really impact screening, you want to know that it can scale, and that means you need to study it in a large and diverse population. So I wanted to provide also one example of how the low EF algorithm has been used in clinical care today. This is a patient who's actually seen at Mayo Clinic. So it was an asymptomatic man, 35 years old, who presented to care after his sister had died unexpectedly. So the cardiology team ordered an ECG, and it was read by the cardiology lab at Mayo Clinic as normal. The AI algorithm, which Mayo currently has running on every ECG, and clinicians can access a dashboard there and look at the results, the AI test for low ejection fraction indicated that the patient did have a low EF. So the cardiology team ordered an echocardiogram. This patient actually had an EF of 18%. His diagnosis was familial dilated cardiomyopathy, and subsequent to this, other family members were screened. So this is just one example where, even if you look at this ECG, a number of cardiologists would pretty quickly say that it's not a totally normal ECG. But because of some of the pressures that you see in the ECG lab, and maybe this is unique to the United States, the call was normal. And the patient was lost, in standard of care would not have been flagged as at risk for low EF. Now, we talked a bit about the randomized controlled trial that was done. One thing that was done after that trial is that the data from that trial was fed into a Markov model that looked at kind of what stage patients were diagnosed in when they were diagnosed with a low ejection fraction. And it drawed from peer-reviewed published literature to look at transition rates, for example, between heart failure stages and then from different heart failure stages to hospitalization or to death. And through that modeling, it really assessed the cost effectiveness of ECG AI at a cost of $100 per test. So what that paper showed was that the cost effectiveness for ECG AI was right at $28,000. Apologies for the font, I'll fix this. So yeah, 27,858. If you compare that to tests that are commonly performed today, digital mammography, it's 26,500. Colorectal cancer screening between $10,000 to $25,000. So very commonly performed screening tests, ECG-AI is on par with. Yeah, sorry, the slides looked fine. I think something happened when exporting them. Apologize for that. But what I wanted to talk about here was our pipeline of algorithms and where it reaches in terms of what's been talked about today. So we have a panel that targets a number of different disease states. Some of the ones I wanted to highlight here, in addition to systolic dysfunction, we have an algorithm that targets diastolic dysfunction, one that targets coronary disease, both coronary disease itself, so obstructive coronary disease or prior MI, and then one that is designed to identify ASCVD risk in addition to what you typically get from clinical risk factors. We also have a number of algorithms that target rare cardiomyopathy, so pulmonary hypertension, cardiac amyloidosis, and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. In the top right box, that should actually read ECG-AI for dilated cardiomyopathy. I swear this looked fine. The reference there is correct, and in that paper, what was done was 435 patients with dilated cardiomyopathy their ECGs were put through the low ejection fraction algorithm. And what was studied was the sensitivity specificity of the algorithm for detecting an EF of less than or equal to 45%. The sensitivity was 98.8%. The specificity was around 50%. So there was a population of controls that had an echocardiogram with ejection fraction measured, and ground truth was dilated cardiomyopathy. So what that's saying is that within that patient population, that specificity is for dilated cardiomyopathy itself, so that very high false positive rate means that you're also capturing some systolic dysfunction as well as dilated cardiomyopathy. Now for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the algorithm that we aim to get cleared in the early part of next year, that has an AU-ROC of 0.96, quite high performance, sensitivity and specificity of 87% and 90% respectively. When you take it into a younger asymptomatic population, that performance goes up. AUC is in the 0.98 to 0.99 range. And so at a prevalence of 1 in 200, what that means is that this test could potentially achieve a positive predictive value of 25%. Again, not a slam dunk for screening, but you add that type of risk stratification to other tools, and you have potentially a very useful risk stratification model. For cardiac amyloidosis, it's actually a fairly similar story. The AUC of the index algorithm published by Mayo Clinic was 0.91, but we have done quite a bit of retraining, gotten it up to 0.96, and there's a prospective study currently underway at Mayo Clinic looking at how this algorithm, coupled to other clinical risk factors, can increase the diagnosis of cardiac amyloidosis. That is all I have. Thank you.
So next I'd like to introduce Ralf van der Valk from Alexion and Patrick Short from Sano Genetics, who are going to talk about a trial of gene therapy in dilated cardiomyopathy.
Fantastic, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I want to thank Professor Bradlow as well for the invitation. I think the topic of our session is really matching well with the previous speakers, but also I would like to acknowledge that you were saying earlier that the slot after lunch is a bit difficult, but the slot before drinks is also difficult. So I will make sure we will be fast. So this is actually a duo presentation as well. My name is Ralf van der Valk. I'm the global program team lead of our first gene therapy that hopefully will go to the clinic here in 2025. And I'm very positive the first patient is going to be dosed in the UK. I used to live in the UK myself as well, so very strong heart for the place where we're speaking today. And it's going to be very exciting for AstraZeneca if we indeed become a gene therapy company today. This is a new area for us, and that's why we work with a lot of, I call it sometimes vendors, but in this case, we work together with Patrick, who's the CEO of Sano Genetics, and this is not a normal vendor for us because we realize how difficult it is to find patients with genetic mutations for an ultra-rare disease. So we are partners in crime and have a very strategic partnership going on here. So why we're here today? Earlier I heard, and I thought it was quite nice, so we need to think, Patrick, about analogies that it's about dating. I don't know if it's appropriate to put in this slide, but it's an ultra-rare disease that we're after. So we're trying to speak with as many physicians as possible here in the UK, set up referral networks and find these patients with BAC3 mutations, because that's what we're after. At the moment, we're planning to open a transfusion center, actually 3. 2 this year. One will be Barts in London, the second would be the Brompton in London as well. And then hopefully next year we will have a transfusion center in Liverpool as well. And we have been discussing with Professor Bradlow, for example, that he could refer his patients to London. But if any of you in the audience is interested in referring or maybe become a transfusion center themselves, please contact our study manager, Natalie, who's the responsible person here in the UK, and we can have that discussion, because I think everyone is very interested in this new modality, and we're moving from personalized medicine to precision medicine. And of course, gene therapy comes with complications, but it's such directed treatment, so the hopes are really high that we're going to help these patients with this high unmet need. So we're here for dating and to set up referral networks. So we heard a lot about AI, and I don't know you guys still seeing patients, how much you use AI, but I use it every day. So what you see here on the right is a picture I just put in ChatGPT. I would like to have a picture of a surgeon doing a surgery of a gene therapy, because that's really what it is. We're really doing a gene transplant. So that comes with a lot of issues, but also a lot of opportunities. So it's a one-time treatment. It's very intensive. We need to give a lot of immunosuppression. It's irreversible. And for that reason, it comes with a lot of education from the physician to the patient, also for the patient. And it's a fantastic opportunity, but it also comes with a lot of responsibility. So I thought it was nice to illustrate that with an AI picture of a surgeon doing a gene transplantation. So what are the reasons to believe in this program? So the drug is called Alexion 2350. We know already for a very long time that mutations in the BAC3 gene cause a severe form of DCM. So we have actually some natural history study data already, and we can clearly see that patients that are carrying BAC3 mutations are even worse off than general DCM patients. And that's also what we know from retrospective analysis. So it's really a defined population with a very high unmet need. There is sufficient evidence from genetic studies, both from family studies and also from hypothesis-free studies, like genome-wide association studies, where we link the gene with the disease. There's a lot of other evidence why we believe that this is the right target to go after. If you knock out BAC3 in the mice, it develops the phenotype. And also, we have very strong clinical data. So if you look here at the graph in the middle, you need to focus on the light green line. That's what we believe is going to be the target dose. It's going to be translating to the highest dose. You see that the patients, I want to say the mice, you could say the disease stabilizes, but if you're really a positive person, you even see a bit of an uptake. So that's not what we're aiming for with this gene therapy. We're aiming to stop the disease, so to stabilize the disease, but it could be a small possibility that we could even see some sort of restoration. What is also important, I shared already earlier, this is gene therapy, so this is an AAV9. You dose the patient only once. It's irreversible, but we're expecting a long durability of efficacy in this patient population. So these are the reasons to believe. What is very interesting, and this is a bit of a journey, so just to explain a little bit about what my work is. So I lead a cross-functional team. I have a head of physicians, research, regulatory, commercial, every function that you need to develop a drug. But before you set up the team, you need to do an investment decision. And when I went to the literature to see how rare is BAC3 DCM, it was really not conclusive. So it really depends on what paper you look and what is the source population. So the judge is still out there, but it could range from 0.3 to almost 8%. It depends, do you go to idiopathic DCM? Is it a patient that is referred for genetic testing? Then, of course, we already heard that there are predictors of genetic disease. Then the prevalence gets higher, and when you're really going after the family members, the prevalence really gets high. So at the moment, we believe it will be around 3% of the patients with DCM, but we need your help to really identify. And Natalie has introduced me to a lot of physicians here in the UK, and I'm relatively positive that we're able to find those patients, because I think we have already identified around 150 cases here in the UK. So I already alluded to our natural history study. This is a study that is fully recruited. We, of course, have the brilliant data from Professor Pablo, which is a retrospective analysis, but we're following 35 patients very intensively. And the reason why we do this is an ultra-rare disease, so we need to develop new endpoints. So I'm very curious to catch up with yourself as well, what maybe your AI algorithm can do for us in this program, or any new techniques that are out there. But we're following these patients, and we have already identified what we believe are novel endpoints and are trying to validate those so that we can use them in the actual clinical development program and get regulatory approval. So that's one thing, it's to identify new endpoints. Of course, it's also a reservoir of patients, so patients that are in the natural history study, they can transition to the clinical trial eventually. And also because with gene therapy, it's way complexer than traditional clinical development. You have to give the immunosuppression, so you can't blind the patient, that's one. And of course, we do cardiac biopsies as well, which of course you can't do in a placebo-treated patient. So for that reason, in our clinical development program, we have an external control arm, which is our natural history study. So what I was sharing, the IND is already open in the US. So the US could be one of the countries where we would go first. We're also quite ahead here in Europe, and the UK is a fantastic environment. It is actually faster than the EMA, and we, what is the exact date, Natalie? We hope to...
Latest 7th of August.
Yeah, for the UK, and then the plan is again to go to Barts, Brompton, Liverpool, and anyone in the audience that is interested. We are happy to chat about setting up more transfusion centers here in the UK. So you don't see the phase here of the study, but with gene therapy, because of those ethical reasons, it's actually a phase 1B that you do. You go directly into patients because of the treatment. So if you expose a patient to an AAV9, it will develop antibodies, and then even they don't have the disease in a healthy volunteer, maybe they still need a delivery mode for future gene therapy. So it's not ethical to go to healthy volunteers, and for that reason we go directly into patients. Then the study is actually pretty straightforward. We start with the low dose. We expect to only dose 3 patients. If we see mild safety findings, so I'm talking about laboratory findings, maybe we transition to 6 patients, but not more than that. Then we go to the top dose, same approach, 3 to 6 patients, and then in the back pocket we have eventually a mid dose as well, but hopefully we have already identified the optimal dose by then. And then, and that's also why we should have a chat, I think, about your algorithms. This is gene therapy, so we can go for accelerated approvals everywhere in the globe. You don't need massive trials, so of course we have a phase 2 and a pivotal phase also designed, but we're really thinking about a handful of patients because we're hoping to see dramatic changes with our gene therapy. I promised to be short, so this was the scientific part, so hopefully everyone is excited that we're coming with a gene therapy to the UK, but I think more suitable for this topic is how are we really finding the patients here in the UK and across the globe, and for that reason I want to invite our strategic partner, Patrick.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Great. I think I'm truly the graveyard shift here, so I'm going to try to keep it interesting and exciting. So thanks, Ralf, for the great introduction here. I want to talk about some of the objectives of the patient finding and engagement program we've been working on. Dovetailing with what Ralf just spoke through, one of the things that's really important for us is making sure that every BAG3 DCM patient has at least an opportunity to consider whether a gene therapy is right for them. There have been a number of talks today about the complexities of patients getting access to genetic testing, but also making decisions about what's right for them at certain points. A big focus for us is making sure that any previously tested patients don't just get lost in the system. And to use the matchmaking analogy, I think it's a really great one. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to hear about this option for them as it comes online into the centers that are relevant for them. We're also looking at no-cost genetic testing in some of the countries that we're operating in based on all the work we've done in the UK and all the research we've done so far and speaking to people, we think the UK is in one of the best positions possible compared to other countries in Europe and in the US with regards to access to genetic testing. We know it's not perfect. Anna showed some data before that showed that not all patients who want to get testing necessarily do, but compared to the US, for example, testing access here is pretty good. So we're starting with no-cost genetic testing for patients in the US, but we are looking at any opportunities to collaborate in other countries where there might be an opportunity to increase access so that no patient that should get access to testing doesn't have access to it today. We're also looking at ways to collect data both from clinicians and also from patients on the unmet need in this population through an insights or registry type program. So I'll talk a little bit about that because not every patient, in fact, most patients won't be necessarily the right fit for a gene therapy trial, but they may be able to contribute to research in a helpful way. So this is if you start on the left here, we know that patients are in clinical trial sites, patients are undergoing routine care, but they're also in places like medical records where they may be a case-finding opportunity to find patients who haven't been genetically tested but should be. They may be in genetic databases where they've been tested or they should have been tested but haven't been recontacted about that updated report in the most timely manner. So we're taking a pretty broad approach to how do we find patients that may have this ultra-rare genetic variant, and then we bring them through a process where they have the opportunity to learn more about gene therapy, access more advanced genetic testing if it's not been available to them in the country that they're in. In the UK, we're really helping people navigate the existing system. So rather than providing testing, we're helping make sure anyone who should get access to testing in the current setup here in the UK has the ability to advocate for themselves or to speak to their doctor about getting access to that testing. If they have had testing already, then we pull it into the platform, we analyze it, and then we help match them on the right-hand side to what might be most appropriate for them. If this is having a conversation with one of the sites about the clinical trial, and that's the right opportunity for them, then that's great. If not, then taking part in natural history study, registry or insights type program, or future genetic cardiomyopathy programs. We've built in consent from the beginning to recontact patients if they choose about future opportunities that might be relevant for them. So in the UK, we're really focused primarily on three main pillars as we build out this referral network that Ralf referred to. The first is really engaging closely with you all in this room where patients are already being seen. How can we make sure that every patient who's had a genetic testing result and has a BAG3 likely pathogenic, or potentially some VUSs that are on the hotter end of the spectrum, we want to make sure that those patients have the opportunity and their healthcare providers have the opportunity to learn more about this program. We're also working closely with existing patient registries where testing has already been done, or there may be samples where there's consent to have testing done, and we can partner together to do that. And then finally, we're working with nonprofit organizations, both small and large, to do digital and community-based campaigns so that patients who may have slipped through the cracks in some way, maybe they've moved or maybe they just don't have the engagement that we'd expect from their local healthcare provider, get a chance to re-engage with the system through this program. So there's really two ways to get involved in the program. Patients can start the process themselves. We have a patient-facing pre-screener that allows them to determine if they might be eligible for one of these programs and loop their healthcare provider in as well through that patient-directed process. They can upload their genetic test results if they've already had them directly through the online platform. There's also a healthcare provider route, so we're working closely with sites to look across their databases to see which patients might be appropriate for recontact for this kind of program and do that in a compliant manner. So I've included a QR code here as well. This is actually live in the US and UK right now. We're expanding to other countries, and like I mentioned before, we have just had a really great experience so far engaging with everyone across the UK at how organized this community is. So I would echo Ralph's optimism and enthusiasm for the impact that the UK is going to have on this gene therapy program. If you have questions or if you want to speak with us in a lot more detail, our emails are going to be on the next slide. So please feel free to visit this website or just speak with us afterwards during the networking reception. And that should have our emails on it, but looks like they haven't shown up. I'll go back to the original slide that has them. Great. Should we hand over back to you for next steps?
Perfect.
Great.
I think, yeah.
So thanks very much to the speakers for what's been an excellent session. I've certainly learned a lot from all of those talks. The speakers have done incredibly well and kept to time. I know it's Friday afternoon and people are probably raring to get away, but I've certainly got some questions and be happy to open to the floor in a moment. If I may, I might go first and ask Samir, if that's possible, a question around AI, ECG. So I think most of the focus in AI has been understandably on diagnosing patients early, particularly in rare diseases, and whether you're talking about transthyretin cardiac amyloidosis, whether you're talking about BAG3 DCM, obviously early diagnosis is key. And we're lucky in that we've got an enormous wealth of investment in new therapies coming down the line, if not already available. But most of these therapies are expensive. So as a clinician working in the NHS, I'm conscious of making sure patients are getting the best from the treatment. And so I'm interested in whether AI ECG can help with disease progression and monitoring and deciding perhaps on when to switch one patient from treatment A to B.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Thank you for it. So there is evidence that, yes, AI ECG can be used for monitoring treatment. So there's a study that was done out of Mayo Clinic looking at patients who with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy who were given mavacamten. It was a very small study, 13 patients. There were 2 non-responders, and what was seen in that study was that for the non-responders, the actual raw score of the algorithm, so the number that's coming out of the neural network and scaled from 0 to 1, that number wasn't really changing. It wasn't going down. Now, for the responders, you actually did see that number go down. So it's telling us that there is some correspondence between the output of the algorithm and the severity of disease. Now, we see that for other disease states as well. For low ejection fraction, there is, it's not a perfect measure, but there is a relationship between the actual raw score of the algorithm and a patient's actual ejection fraction. And what's probably a stronger correlate is when the score is going up or down, whether the ejection fraction itself is going up or down. So I think the potential is there. For amyloidosis, it's a little more difficult because, as you said, the treatments are emerging, so we don't exactly have the data set that's going to enable us to answer that question, but hopefully we'll be able to get there soon.
That's great. Thank you very much for a comprehensive answer. Certainly looks encouraging for the future. Bodhi, it looks like you've got a question. I open up to the floor, Bodhi first. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. I had a question about AI. You'll notice from the talks today we have a real challenge about who should we be discharging. Your AI algorithm that makes the differentiation on left ventricular function, is that there or is it a prospective score? Are you able to tell us whether there is a score that predicts development in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the algorithm itself is validated on an echocardiogram within 30 days. So if it's testing positive, right, it's indicating that the patient has a low EF then and there. However, if you were to look at patients who did not have a reduced ejection fraction despite having a positive result, they actually have, over a 5-year period, a fourfold increased risk for developing a low EF. So there is some pathology that's not showing up on echo that we're identifying risk for. So yeah, in the long run, I think we do see it as a potential biomarker that goes beyond disease identification. For discharging patients, the algorithm, it has a high negative predictive value for a reduced EF, 98.5% in patients who are getting echoes and ECGs. So I think that's a very real use case. And in fact, we have some prospective studies going in the United States where they're using it just for that reason. They're essentially using the algorithm to prioritize echocardiograms. Basically, if you have a patient who has like a fairly maybe they have a borderline pretest probability for a reduced EF. Well, now you can run the AI algorithm. If they're negative, you don't get an echo. If they're positive, then you reflex, you get an echo, and go from there.
Yeah, but another question from Bethan. Go for it.
Sorry.
No, as in from the floor.
What a cheek. Brilliant talk. It's really exciting to hear about the new gene therapies that are on their way, hopefully, to clinical practice. I'm from the Brompton, and we have been keeping an eye out for the BAG3s, obviously, and we've got another one coming up soon looking at PKP2 and arrhythmogenic cardiomyopathy, so it's all good. But my question is actually to Nora. There's a lot of, obviously, we know that within genetic testing, there is some mistrust with people in the community in terms of what genetic testing is, what it means. How do you think this will play out with the public and patients in terms of gene therapy? Do you think there will be similar issues with ethical considerations and whatnot?
Yes, I think probably any new treatment people are going to be wary of, and depending on how well that person is, they will obviously going to be weighing up the risks and benefits. So,
do you think it possibly will be more charged, though, with something like gene therapy?
You mean like Frankenstein babies type connotations that people get?
Yeah, just being devil's advocate. Yeah,
like things like that. I think there is a subsection of the community who are always going to be very suspicious of the intentions of the medical professionals involved in whatever conspiracy theorists type section of. But I think by and large, most people in the UK have got faith in the medical professionals that are taking care of them and do trust them to give them unbiased, warts and all, pros and cons of a particular treatment. So there's going to be upskilling to be done, isn't there, for all of us who might be asked about these sorts of therapies by patients.
Thank you.
Will, can I ask a quick question of Patrick? So you mentioned this at the British Cardiac Society when we spoke, and I was bowled over by it. Tell us about the genetic testing situation for cardiomyopathies in the US versus the UK. Like, what's your experience been?
Yeah, it's a good question. So depending on what data sets you use, the estimates range from between 1 and 10% in the US of patients who should get access to genetic testing that do, compared to, I think Anna showed good slides earlier, and I think everyone practicing in the room would say well over 50%, and in some centers significantly more than that, do in the UK and much of Europe. This is due to the different structure of the healthcare systems, it's due to reimbursement, it's due to some of the challenges like insurance that were discussed earlier that are much more pronounced in the US compared to here. One of the challenges as well is around early diagnosis of patients who are missed in the system. So it is sometimes hard to wrap our arms around a perfect number of what is the numerator and what's the denominator of who should get tested and who does. But we know that it's significantly better here than most other countries that we work in, which is great. It doesn't mean it's perfect, like I said earlier, but it's a really great foundation. And that's why I think most of the conversation today has been about how do we perfect cascade testing in unaffected family members versus how do we just even get the baseline testing of people who have a diagnosis tested, which is a really, I think, good position to be in compared to many other countries.
So give yourselves a pat on the back for that.
Can I just add something to that? Do you think it's a disincentive being in an insurance-based healthcare system in the US that people don't want to have a genetic test or don't want to have a predictive test because it might make it more difficult for them to get insurance for healthcare?
I think that is. I think that's a significant driver. I haven't seen any research done directly in cardiomyopathy from the patient and the provider perspective, but I have seen it in neurology and some other disciplines where that is a big factor in the US, but it is also related around whether the doctor can get reimbursed for the test. It's not so much driven by the patient. I would guess it's probably more so derived from the reimbursement practices of how difficult it is to get insurance to pay for it and working backwards from there compared to the patient choice. But the patient choice, I think, is a significant factor more so than it is here.
Can I ask one other question of you in terms of access to testing? So one of the things we struggle with, even in the West Midlands, which is a super diverse ethnic population where, in fact, there are more non-white than white individuals in the West Mids. But if you look at access to genetic testing, the vast majority of patients are white, and we're seeing very few Afro-Caribbeans come forward. I'm talking not just about hereditary ATTR, but also the same for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, dilated cardiomyopathy. What can we do to improve that?
It's my starting point for this would be to work backwards with the communities and try to understand what are the barriers that are in place there. And I haven't done that work directly in ATTR or others to be able to comment directly. That's where I would start. Some of my hypotheses would be around, there are barriers to access, including are these populations seeing the right specialists at the right rate? Are they being referred? Are there barriers? What we see in most cases is when people get to the top tier centers, everyone gets access to testing. So is there a gap that's stopping those referrals from being made in the first place? And if so, how can we work to solve for that? That would be my initial reaction to it.
I don't have a solution either. I was just interested to hear, but it's incredibly difficult. I think you're right. We've got to go to the root cause level, right back to communities, and I think patient advocates are really key. So actually, that's what we're hoping to do, is to get patients from the same background to talk to their community. I think that's the only way we're going to win that battle. Great. Well, I think unless there's any other questions from the floor, I'm just going to hand over to Will for some final words.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I've just got a little list of thank yous. So thank you all for staying the distance. It feels a bit like Squid Game. We're down to the final tranche. And as a reward, there's not like £1 million, unfortunately. There are 7 Cardiomyopathy UK T-shirts at the back for anyone who would like them. I did ask whether I could throw them into the crowd, with a hat. It was a no. So they're there if you want them. I want to thank the speakers for the very, very high quality of their talks. And I think for me, I've come away just with a lot of passion and enthusiasm for the topic, and also just like seeing what rude health British cardiology is in, particularly around ICC. There's real experts in this room, and I think it's been hugely beneficial. A big thanks to our sponsors who have helped subsidise the day in terms of attendance, and a massive thanks to those of you who've travelled intercontinentally. It's a big deal, and it means a lot for us to have you here and give us a little peek into the future. And finally, I want to thank Cardiomyopathy UK. So I've been a lifelong fan, a consultant-long fan of Cardiomyopathy UK, because they have really been a fantastic support from the off. I have no hesitation in recommending patients them, because I know they're going to do well by the charity. And in fact, as a registrar, I came to one of these, so it's almost where I found my feet in the cardiomyopathy world. And they've supported this financially as much as the sponsors. So I think if we could give a big round of applause for Cardiomyopathy UK. And I've just got a